The atmosphere is approximately 60 miles thick, 60 miles, less than the distance from San Jose to San Francisco, a paper-thin layer of gas wrapped around a rock, and everything that has ever lived has lived inside it. That layer is changing. The changes are measurable, documented, and in many respects already locked in. This episode is about learning the vocabulary to understand what is happening, because the words matter, and you are the generation that will spend most of your life using them. The first word is finite. Finite means it has edges. The atmosphere is finite. The ocean's capacity to absorb heat is finite. The amount of carbon that can be released before temperatures rise by 2 degrees Celsius is finite, and that number has a name, the carbon budget. We have been spending the carbon budget the way someone spends a fixed savings account, without looking at the balance. Finite is the word that turns an abstract concern into a mathematical fact. Some things, once changed, cannot go back. A coral reef that bleaches due to warming water can recover if the water cools. A coral reef that bleaches repeatedly does not recover, it dies. Some changes are irreversible. Irreversible means the door has closed. Not difficult to reverse, impossible. The extinction of a species is irreversible. The melting of the West Antarctic ice sheet past a certain temperature threshold becomes irreversible. Even if temperatures later fall, the process continues. The volatile swings in weather patterns that follow are not temporary. They are the new baseline. Climate science uses irreversible carefully because it is a word that changes what kind of problem you're dealing with. So a reversible problem can be fixed later, an irreversible one cannot. The planet hosts millions of species, most of them found nowhere else on Earth. A species native to a single ecosystem, dependent on that exact combination of soil, altitude, temperature, and rainfall, and is endemic. Endemic has 2 uses in ecology. A species endemic to the Galapagos Islands is found only there. Remove those conditions, and it has nowhere to go. In public health, an endemic disease is one that is consistently present in a population at predictable levels, as opposed to an epidemic, which spreads suddenly. Climate change is making both meanings more urgent. Endemic species face habitat loss with no alternative range, and diseases are becoming endemic in regions that were previously too cold to support them. Some communities are more exposed than others. The degree to which a place or population is exposed to harm is its vulnerability. Vulnerability comes from the Latin vulnus, a wound. To be vulnerable is to be woundable, to have an exposure that could become a harm. Tenacious coastal communities have been managing their vulnerability for generations, building seawalls and drainage systems and early warning networks. But vulnerability is not just about physical exposure, it is also about resources. A wealthy country with a warming coastline can build barriers. A low-lying island nation with limited resources may not be able to. One of the less visible but prevalent consequences of warming is what happens when the planet's carbon sinks change. Forests, oceans, and soils absorb carbon dioxide. They sequester it, pulling it out of the atmosphere and locking it away. From the Latin sequicere, to follow. To sequester something is to set it aside, to take it out of the sequence of events. A juror who is sequestered is removed from public influence. Carbon that is sequestered is removed from the atmospheric cycle. The same root gives us sequence, things that follow in order. Consequence, what follows from an action. Subsequent, coming after. Consecutive, following without interruption. Sequel, what follows the original. And non sequitur, a conclusion that does not follow from its premise. Carbon sequestration is what healthy forests and oceans do naturally. As they degrade, less carbon is sequestered, and more remains in the atmosphere. Exposed soil, stressed ecosystems, and changing rainfall patterns all erode the land, from the Latin roder, cabia, to gnaw. Erosion is the earth being gnawed away, grain by water and wind. The same root gives us corrode, to gnaw through metal. Rodent, the gnawing animal, the one whose teeth never stop, and rostrum, the beak of a bird, which gnaws, and by extension the speaker's platform, because the rostra of ancient Rome were decorated with the bronze beaks of captured warships. Erosion is patient, it does not announce itself, it simply keeps going. The shifting of climate zones is redefining what temperate means. Temperate carries 2 meanings that have drifted apart. A temperate climate is mild, not too hot, not too cold, with seasonal variation. A temperate person is moderate, not extreme in their reactions. Both senses share the root temperare, to regulate, to keep in proper measure, the temperate zones of the planet. The regions between the tropics and the poles, home to most of the world's farmland, are shifting as warming escalates. Escalate comes from the Latin scala, a ladder or staircase. To escalate is to climb the rungs. Sea levels escalate. Wildfire frequency escalates. The cost of inaction escalates with every year that the underlying problem grows. Resilient communities adapt to individual events, but escalating frequency and severity eventually outpaces even the most unprecedented adaptation efforts. The rate of change has become precipitous. Precipitous describes a slope that drops away without warning. From the Latin praeceps, headlong, rushing forward face first. A precipitous decline in Arctic sea ice. A precipitous rise in average ocean temperatures. The word implies both steepness and danger, the sense that the rate of change has exceeded what careful management can absorb. Extreme rainfall events inundate communities that were never designed to handle them. Inundate comes from the Latin inunda, a wave. To inundate is to be overrun by waves, literally or figuratively. A town can be inundated by floodwater. A government agency can be inundated by requests it cannot process. An ecosystem can be inundated by an invasive species. In every case, the meaning is the same. The system has received more than it can absorb, and the excess does damage. This is where Part 1 leaves us, at the edge of a very steep slope with the waves rising. Part 2 is about whether we climb back and how. 15 words. Own them. Finite. Having edges. Limited. Capable of being exhausted. Irreversible. Impossible to undo. Past the point of no return. Endemic. Native to a specific place, also persistently present in an area. Vulnerability. Exposure to harm. Susceptibility to damage. Sequester. To set apart and store. To remove carbon from the atmosphere. Erode. To wear away gradually through persistent force. Temperate or mild and moderate, also showing self-restraint. Escalate. To increase in intensity or severity. To climb the rungs. Precipitous. Dangerously steep. Sudden and rapid in decline or rise. Inundate. To overwhelm with more than can be absorbed. To submerge. +5 you already know. Volatile, unprecedented, tenacious, resilient, and prevalent. Part 1 described what is already happening. Changes that are documented, measurable, and in some cases irreversible. Part 2 is about what we are going to do. What the vocabulary of response looks like. The relationship between a person and the land they tend has a name. Stewardship. Stewardship is older than environmentalism. A steward was originally a household manager, responsible for maintaining the estate for those who owned it and those who would inherit it. To exercise stewardship over a natural resource means managing it not for maximum short-term extraction, but for long-term health. The concept is embedded in indigenous land management practices that predate modern conservation by centuries. It is also embedded in the argument that the current generation has an obligation of stewardship towards those who come after. Sustainability asks whether what we are doing can continue. A word card appears on screen. Sustainability, and the ability to be maintained at a current level without depleting the resources it depends on. Meeting present needs without compromising the future. Sustainable means it can be sustained, kept going. An agricultural practice that depletes the soil each season is not sustainable. One that replenishes what it uses is. A city that draws water faster than its aquifer refills is not sustainable. The word is formidable in its ambition. True sustainability requires redesigning systems, not just reducing their worst outputs. Greenwashing has made the word contentious, but the concept is precise. Can the system continue without consuming what it depends on? Understanding the problem is not enough. What climate action requires is recognizing that it is an imperative. A word card appears on screen. Imperative wyłączenie age. An urgent and essential requirement. Absolutely necessary. Also, the grammatical mood of commands. A word card appears on screen. Imperative, imperare. Latin, to command. Emperor, imperial, empire. Command, imperious. From the Latin, imperare, to command. An imperative is not a suggestion or a preference. It is a command issued by circumstances. The same root gives us emperor, imperial, and imperious. In grammar, the imperative is the verb form that issues commands: go, stop, act. In climate discussions, the imperative is the recognition that certain actions are no longer optional. Waiting has a cost that keeps compounding. The relentless challenge of climate action is building the will to act at scale. Individual action matters, but the problem requires mobilizing institutions, governments, and economies. A word card appears on screen. Mobilize, idea. To organize and prepare people or resources for action, to bring into active service toward a goal. Mobilize comes from the military. To mobilize an army is to move it from peace footing to readiness for action. In climate context, mobilize means moving the enormous, slow machinery of governments and economies toward action. Redirecting capital, retraining workers, retooling infrastructure. The inevitable tension is between the pace at which mobilization is possible and the pace at which change is needed. The most formidable obstacle to climate action is that it requires consensus among countries that have different interests, different histories, and different levels of responsibility for the problem. A word card appears on screen. Consensus. General agreement among a group, a collective position reached through discussion rather than imposition. A word card appears on screen. Consensus. Con. Latin, together. Plus. Sentire. Latin. To feel, to perceive, consent, dissent, assent, sentient, sense, sensation. From con, together, and centered, to feel or perceive. Consensus means feeling together, arriving at the same position through shared understanding. The same root gives us consent, dissent, assent, and sentient. A consensus is not unanimity. It requires enough shared ground to move forward. Building international consensus on climate is partisan in its difficulty. National interests, historical emissions, and economic stakes all pull in different directions. Some moments in a problem's history become turning points, moments after which the choice is narrow and the stakes change. A moment like that is called a watershed. Watershed is a geography term first. The ridge of high ground that divides where rainfall flows. Water on one side drains one way, water on the other side drains another. By extension, a watershed event is one that determines which direction everything that follows will flow. The Paris Agreement of 2015 was called a watershed. The 2021 IPCC report calling climate change Code Red was called a watershed. Whether a given moment actually functions as a watershed depends entirely on what happens after it. The scale of the climate problem is one that no individual, company, or country can address alone. The response must be collective. Collective action is action taken by a group as a whole. Not aggregated individual actions, but coordinated group behavior aimed at a shared goal. The challenge of collective climate action is the free rider problem. If every country waits for others to act first, no one acts. The solution is creating a framework in which acting together is more rational than waiting. The frameworks need to be robust enough to hold under pressure. Robust means sturdy across conditions, not just functional when everything is cooperative, but durable when circumstances are adverse. A robust climate agreement is one with enforcement mechanisms, not just aspirations. A robust emissions trading system has genuine price signals and real penalties, not symbolic ones. Meeting that standard is incumbent on the generation now in power, and on the one entering it. Incumbent carries two meanings. As an adjective, it is incumbent upon someone to do something, means it is their obligatory duty. As a noun, the incumbent is the current holder of an office. Both meanings apply here. It is incumbent upon current decision makers to act, and the incumbent institutions are the ones that must carry the weight of change. If they fail, the debate about what went wrong will polarize the politics of every country on Earth for decades. Polarize comes from the poles, the magnetic poles that pull in opposite directions. To polarize a debate is to pull its participants apart until there is no middle ground, only two ends of a magnet. Climate is already among the most polarized topics in democratic politics. The science is clear, the response is partisan, and the gap between what evidence demands and what politics delivers grows with every year the problem compounds. The inheritance is real. The vocabulary is yours. What you do with both of them is the question. Word recap, episode 32. 30 words, 20 new, 10 review. Own them. Part 1. What's already happening, finite. Irreversible, endemic. Vulnerability, sequester, erode, temperate, escalate, precipitous, inundate. Part 2. What we do now, stewardship. Responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. Sustainability. Maintaining what we have without depleting what we need. Imperative. An urgent non-optional requirement, a command from circumstances, mobilize. To organize people or resources for coordinated action. Consensus. General agreement reached through shared understanding. Watershed, a turning point after which everything flows differently. Collective. Done jointly by a group, shared and coordinated. Robust. Strong enough to hold under difficult or adverse conditions. Incumbent. Obligatory as a duty. Also currently holding office. Polarize. To divide into sharply opposing groups. To pull apart. +10 you already know. Volatile, unprecedented, tenacious, resilient, prevalent, formidable, relentless, contentious, inevitable, and partisan.